I was hired to bathe him, but I fell in love, a billionaire's unexpected romance. Bathing him was her job, falling in love wasn't in the deal. The steam curled around Amelia's face, blurring the edges of the opulent bathroom. The scent of lavender and sandalwood hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. This was it, her first official day. Not just any day, but the day she started caring for him. Mr. Edward Humphrey, the reclusive billionaire, the man whose life had been irrevocably altered by a car accident a year ago. She adjusted the temperature of the water one last time, testing it with her elbow. Perfect. Not too hot, not too cold. Just right, like Goldilocks and her porridge, she thought with a nervous giggle. This was her job. Bathing him, helping him regain some semblance of normalcy. But the weight of the responsibility felt immense. The door creaked open, and Mrs. Gable, the stern but surprisingly kind housekeeper, wheeled Mr. Humphrey into the room. He was a shadow of the man he once was, Amelia realized with a pang. His eyes, though still a startling shade of blue, held a deep sadness, a flicker of the pain he carried. He didn't acknowledge Amelia, his gaze fixed on some distant point only he could see. "Amelia, this is Mr. Humphrey," Mrs. Gable said, her voice gentle. "He understands everything you say, even if he doesn't always show it. Be patient, be kind." Amelia took a deep breath and forced a smile. "Good morning, Mr. Humphrey. It's nice to finally meet you. I'm Amelia, and I'm here to help you." Silence. Only the soft hiss of the running water filled the room. Amelia's smile faltered, but she pressed on. She began to explain the process, her voice calm and reassuring. "We'll take things slowly, Mr. Humphrey. I'll help you get comfortable. Just let me know if anything feels uncomfortable, okay?" Still no response. Amelia felt a wave of self-doubt wash over her. Was she cut out for this? Could she handle the emotional toll of caring for someone so broken? Mrs. Gable squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "He's just getting used to you, dear. Don't take it personally." With a final nod, she left Amelia alone with Mr. Humphrey and the daunting task ahead. Amelia knew that she had to show him she was there to care for him and that she would never make him uncomfortable. Amelia knelt beside him, meeting his gaze. "Mr. Humphrey," she said softly, "I know this isn't easy. But I promise I'll do everything I can to make you comfortable." A flicker of something crossed his face, recognition, perhaps, or maybe just resignation. It was enough. Amelia took it as a sign to proceed, steeling herself for the challenges to come. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance to make a difference, to bring a little light back into a darkened world. A chance to care for someone who needs it desperately. Amelia had always been a caregiver, even before it became her profession. Growing up, she'd looked after her younger siblings, patching up their scraped knees, reading them bedtime stories, and offering a comforting presence during thunderstorms. It was in her nature to nurture, to heal. After her parents passed away, she drifted through a series of jobs, never quite finding her place. Then, she saw the advertisement for a live-in caregiver for Mr. Edward Humphrey. The description was vague, only mentioning a gentleman requiring assistance after an accident. But something about it resonated with her, a pull she couldn't ignore. Edward Humphrey had been a titan of industry, a self-made billionaire known for his ruthless business acumen and his extravagant lifestyle. He was a man who commanded attention and who lived life on his terms. But all that changed in an instant. A drunk driver, a blind curve, and a life shattered into a million pieces. The accident left him physically disabled, confined to a wheelchair, and emotionally withdrawn. He had lost his ability to speak, his memory was fragmented, and his spirit seemed to have been extinguished. He had become a prisoner in his own body, trapped in a world of silence and darkness. Before the accident, Edward had been engaged to a beautiful socialite named Isabella. They were the power couple of the city, their faces gracing magazine covers and their names whispered in hushed tones at exclusive parties. But after the accident, Isabella disappeared. Amelia heard whispers from the staff that she could not handle Edward's condition. Money and connections weren't enough to handle that. His vast estate, once a hub of activity, had become a mausoleum of memories. The laughter and music were replaced by an unsettling silence, broken only by the footsteps of the staff and the hum of medical equipment. Amelia learned about all of this from Mrs. Gable, who had been with the Humphrey family for decades. Mrs. Gable was a treasure trove of information, a walking encyclopedia of the household's history. She told Amelia about Edward's passions, his love for art, his skill at playing the piano, and his sharp wit. She painted a picture of a man who was vibrant and alive, a stark contrast to the shell of a man Amelia had met. He was a good man, Amelia, Mrs. Gable said, her voice thick with emotion. He just needs someone to help him find his way back. That's what Amelia hoped to do. She knew it wouldn't be easy. She was prepared for the challenges, the frustrations, the setbacks. But she was also prepared to offer her compassion, her patience, and her unwavering support. She had the chance to make him smile again. To let him know that she would do everything to help him. She knew that bathing him was just the beginning. It was the first step towards building trust and forging a connection. It was a chance to show him that he wasn't alone, that someone cared. And maybe, just maybe, it was a chance to find something she hadn't even realized she was looking for. The first few weeks were a blur of routine and observation. Amelia learned Edward's rhythms, his preferences, and his subtle cues. She discovered that he enjoyed having the curtains open in the morning, that he preferred chamomile tea over coffee, and that he found solace in listening to classical music. Bathing him was a delicate dance of respect and care. Amelia always announced her intentions, explaining each step before she took it. She made sure the water was just right and the temperature comfortable. She washed him gently, paying attention to his skin and noting any changes or sensitivities. Edward remained largely unresponsive, his expression blank, his eyes distant. But Amelia noticed small things, a slight tensing of his muscles when she touched a certain spot, a faint flicker of recognition in his eyes when she spoke to him about his favorite composer, Beethoven. One afternoon, as Amelia was helping him into the bath, Edward suddenly flinched, his body rigid. He let out a strangled sound, a guttural noise that startled Amelia. "Mr. Humphrey, are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. He squeezed his eyes shut, his face contorted in pain. Amelia didn't know what to do. Was it a spasm? A memory? A nightmare playing out in his mind? "Mr. Humphrey, can you tell me what's wrong?" she pleaded, her hands hovering over him, unsure where to touch. He shook his head violently, his body trembling. Amelia felt a surge of panic. She couldn't just stand there and watch him suffer. On instinct, she did the only thing she could think of. She began to hum. A simple melody, a lullaby her mother used to sing to her when she was a child. The effect was immediate. Edward's body began to relax, the tension slowly ebbing away. His breathing became more regular, his faceless strained. Amelia continued to hum, her voice soft and soothing. She didn't know why it was working, but she wasn't about to stop. As the last notes faded away, Edward opened his eyes. For the first time, Amelia saw a glimmer of clarity in them, a spark of awareness. He looked at her, really looked at her, his gaze lingering on her face. Then, he did something that made Amelia's heart skip a beat. He reached out and gently touched her hand. It was a small gesture, barely perceptible. But it was a breakthrough. A sign that he was still in there, that he was capable of connecting, of feeling. Tears welled up in Amelia's eyes. She squeezed his hand gently, her heart overflowing with emotion. "It's okay, Mr. Humphrey," she whispered. "I'm here." That moment changed everything. It was a turning point in their relationship, a crack in the wall that Edward had built around himself. It was the moment Amelia realized that this was more than just a job. It was a connection, a bond forming between two souls who desperately needed each other. It was also the moment she knew that she was in trouble. Because in that brief, fleeting touch, Amelia felt something stir within her, something she hadn't expected. Something that wasn't in the contract. She was falling in love with Edward Humphrey. After that day, Edward began to show more signs of engagement. He started responding to Amelia's voice, turning his head when she spoke. He would occasionally make small sounds and attempts at communication. He even managed a weak smile once or twice. Amelia seized on these small victories, celebrating each one as a major milestone. She spent hours talking to him, reading to him, playing his favorite music. She told him about her life, her dreams, her fears. She treated him like a person, not a patient. She learned that Edward had a keen sense of humor despite his inability to express it fully. She would tell him jokes, and he would respond with a subtle twitch of his lips or a glint in his eyes. She also learned about his passions. He loved art, especially Impressionism. Amelia would bring him art books and describe the paintings in detail, pointing out the brushstrokes, the colors, and the emotions conveyed. One day, Amelia brought him a set of watercolors and a blank canvas. She didn't expect him to do anything with them, but she thought he might enjoy looking at them. To her surprise, Edward reached out and grabbed a brush. He dipped it in the blue paint and began to dab it on the canvas. His movements were clumsy and hesitant, but he persisted. Amelia watched in amazement as he slowly created a picture. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was a work of art. A simple blue square on a white background, but filled with emotion, with longing. From then on, painting became a regular activity. Amelia would set up the easel, and Edward would paint. He experimented with different colors and different techniques. His paintings became more expressive and more confident. As Edward's physical and emotional state improved, Amelia's feelings for him deepened. She found herself drawn to his strength, his resilience, his vulnerability. She admired his determination to overcome his challenges and his refusal to give up. She knew it was wrong. She was his caregiver, not his lover. It was unprofessional, unethical, and potentially dangerous. But she couldn't help it. Her heart had made its choice. She tried to distance herself, to suppress her feelings. But it was no use. Every time she looked at him, every time she touched him, every time she heard his voice, her heart would flutter. One evening, as Amelia was helping Edward get ready for bed, he reached out and took her hand. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. He couldn't speak clearly, but she could see the words in his eyes. He felt it, too. The connection, the attraction, the love. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it softly. It was a chaste kiss, but it sent a jolt of electricity through Amelia's body. She knew she had to say something to stop this before it went too far. But she couldn't find the words. Instead, she leaned down and kissed him back. A gentle, tentative kiss, but filled with all the longing and emotion she had been suppressing for so long. The kiss deepened, becoming more passionate, more urgent. Amelia lost herself in the moment, forgetting everything but the man in her arms. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, their eyes wide with shock and desire. "Amelia," Edward whispered, his voice raspy but clear. It was the first time he had spoken her name in weeks. It was a demolition, a confession. Amelia knew that they had crossed a line. There was no going back. They were in uncharted territory, a place where love and duty collided. A love story that might never see the light of day. The staff started to notice the change in Edward and Amelia. The looks and smiles between them. Mrs. Gable saw the change and warned Amelia about getting too close. She told her that Edward was vulnerable and needed to focus on getting better. She also reminded Amelia that she was just an employee. The days that followed were filled with stolen glances, whispered conversations, and secret touches. Amelia and Edward were living in a bubble, a world of their creation. But their happiness couldn't last forever. The outside world was closing in, threatening to shatter their fragile reality. Isabella, Edward's former fiancée, returned. She had heard about Edward's improvement and decided to try and weasel her way back into his life. Amelia was devastated. She knew that Isabella was Edward's past, a reminder of the life he had lost. She couldn't compete with that, especially if she never was his girl, to begin with. Isabella wasted no time in trying to undermine Amelia. She questioned her competence, her motives, and her relationship with Edward. She made it clear that she wanted Amelia gone. Edward, torn between his past and his present, struggled to choose between the two women. Amelia watched him, her heart breaking, knowing that she might lose him. She just could not be selfish for this. One evening, Isabella confronted Amelia in the garden. She accused her of taking advantage of Edward's vulnerability and manipulating him for her gain. Amelia defended herself, telling Isabella that she loved Edward and that she only wanted what was best for him. She wanted to see him smile. Isabella laughed. Love? You don't know what love is. You're just a caregiver, a temporary distraction. He'll never love you the way he loved me. Amelia felt a surge of anger. She wanted to slap Isabella, to tell her that she was wrong. But she held back. She knew that fighting wouldn't solve anything. Instead, she took a deep breath and said, "Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not good enough for him. But I love him, and I'll do whatever it takes to make him happy, even if that means leaving." With that, Amelia turned and walked away, tears streaming down her face. She knew that she had to do what was right, even if it broke her heart. Amelia decided to resign. She wrote a letter to Mrs. Gable, explaining her reasons and apologizing for any inconvenience she had caused. She packed her belongings, her heart heavy with sorrow. Before she left, she wanted to say goodbye to Edward. She found him in his study, sitting by the window, staring out at the garden. He looked up when she entered, his eyes filled with confusion. Amelia knelt beside him and took his hand. "I'm leaving, Mr. Humphrey," she said softly. "I think it's for the best." Edward's face contorted in protest. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Amelia smiled sadly. "I know you don't understand. But trust me, this is the right thing to do." She leaned down and kissed him one last time, a lingering, heartfelt kiss that conveyed all the love and pain she felt. As she pulled away, Edward grabbed her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. He looked at her with desperation in his eyes. Then, he did something that no one expected. He stood up. It was a struggle, his body weak and unsteady. But he managed to stand, his legs trembling beneath him. He took a step towards Amelia, then another. He stumbled, but she caught him, holding him tight. "Amelia," he said, his voice raspy but clear. "Don't go." Tears streamed down Amelia's face. She couldn't believe what was happening. Edward was standing, he was speaking, he was fighting for her. Isabella walked into the study, her face a mask of fury. "What is going on here?" she demanded. Edward turned to her, his eyes filled with determination. "Isabella," he said, his voice stronger now. "I don't love you. I love Amelia." Isabella gasped, her face turning white with rage. "You're making a mistake," she shrieked. "You'll regret this." Edward ignored her. He turned back to Amelia, his eyes filled with love. "Amelia," he said, "stay with me. Please." Amelia's heart overflowed with joy. She threw her arms around Edward, holding him close. "I'll stay," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I'll always stay." Isabella stormed out of the room, her dreams of reclaiming Edward shattered. Edward and Amelia stood there, holding each other, their love stronger than ever. They had faced adversity, they had overcome obstacles, they had found their way back to each other. And in that moment, they knew that their love story was just beginning. Edward continued to recover, his physical and emotional strength growing each day. With Amelia by his side, he made remarkable progress. He regained his ability to speak fluently, his memory sharpened, and his spirit soared. He started painting again, his artwork becoming more vibrant and more expressive. He even started playing the piano again, his music filling the house with joy. Amelia stayed by his side, supporting him, encouraging him, and loving him unconditionally. She became his rock, his confidant, his soulmate. Edward knew that he owed everything to Amelia. She had saved him from despair. She had given him a reason to live. She had shown him the true meaning of love. One sunny afternoon, Edward took Amelia to the garden, the place where their love story had truly blossomed. He led her to a secluded spot surrounded by roses and lilies. He got down on one knee, his eyes filled with love. "Amelia," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Will you marry me?" Amelia gasped, her heart overflowing with joy. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Edward slipped a diamond ring on her finger, a symbol of their eternal love. They embraced, their hearts beating as one. News of their engagement spread quickly, surprising and delighting everyone who knew them. Some people questioned their relationship, doubting its sincerity. But Edward and Amelia didn't care. They knew that their love was real, that it was meant to be. They planned a beautiful wedding, a celebration of their love and their journey together. They invited their family, their friends, and all the people who had supported them along the way. Mrs. Gable beamed with joy as she helped plan the ceremony. On the day of the wedding, Amelia looked radiant in her white gown, her eyes sparkling with happiness. Edward stood proudly at the altar, his heart filled with love. As Amelia walked down the aisle, Edward's eyes met hers, and they both knew that they were exactly where they were supposed to be. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with heartfelt vows and touching moments. Edward and Amelia exchanged rings, promising to love and cherish each other for all eternity. As they were pronounced husband and wife, they kissed, sealing their love with a passionate embrace. The guests cheered, celebrating the union of two souls who were destined to be together. After the ceremony, they had a lavish reception filled with music, dancing, and laughter. Edward and Amelia danced the night away, their love shining brightly for all to see. They honeymooned in Italy, visiting the art galleries and museums that Edward loved so much. They explored the countryside, savoring the beauty of the Italian landscape. As they strolled hand in hand through the streets of Florence, Edward turned to Amelia, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for saving me." Amelia smiled. "You saved me, too," she said. "We saved each other." They returned home, ready to start their new life together. They settled into a cozy cottage on the Humphrey estate, surrounded by love and happiness. Edward continued to paint and play the piano, his art bringing joy to everyone who saw it. Amelia continued to care for him, her love and devotion unwavering. They lived a long and happy life together, their love growing stronger with each passing year. They had children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, all of whom were inspired by their love story. And so, the story of Edward Humphrey and Amelia, the caregiver who fell in love with her patient, became a legend, a testament to the power of love to heal, transform, and endure.